to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. This YouTube channel is dedicated to helping you get better at Bannerlord through the use of field command and advanced tactics. We continue on with our late game campaign in this episode, and we have a situation here that is developing. After that tremendous, I don't know, 5 or 6 battles in a row where we were able to successfully win, we took Ataconia Castle and left a nice sized garrison there. But it's like we kicked the hornet's nest, because look at all these other armies that seem to be heading in this direction of Ataconia. On top of that, there are tracks down here that indicate a force is likely heading that way. I was heading back to Epicrotea to gather some of the garrison, some of the large garrison at Epicrotea there, once we were able to finally restock that garrison. And I don't have many other armies I can call here. We've got this army in the north that's defending, but there were clearly tracks down here that look like a large force of, well, probably Northern Empire. It looked like a 1500 plus that was down here. So it's possible these other kingdoms are also sieging down there. I'm at a stage of my campaign where the enemy simply doesn't have enough targets to attack, and so frequently multiple kingdoms will siege the same target. So we are going to disband this other army. I hate to do that, but I need these troops to fight off this force down here. I had kind of a skeleton crew. My own army, of course, is dramatically reduced. When's the last time you saw me with an army of 375? We dumped a bunch of our garrison, and I was going to run up to Epicrotea here and sort of shuttle troops, but now I don't feel like I have time. Okay, there's another... shit. So Varcheg is also under siege in the north. That's got a good sized garrison though. Yeah, it's almost 600 there. We're just gonna have to fight these battles one at a time here, one thing at a time here. So I'm gathering up all these forces as fast as I can. You can see our army here is greatly diminished from its normal strength, 237 guys, and that's because I dumped a bunch of guys in Ataconia Castle to help sort of bolster the defenses there. Now we still have some pretty good troops here, but I've got to have more than 380 troops. This is not one of the 300 series where we're just messing around with 300 guys. This is our campaign fighting against the whole map. And I don't have any other castles down here, so I'm not sure where these other troops are going. Vergos Castle, look at this shit. Now there's a Battanian force. Well, we're going to intercept them. I presume they're coming north. We're going to intercept their asses before they can come north here. I'm going to get a few more forces. It's going to take a little bit. Here they come. And then we should be able to intercept this Battanian force before they come and attack. But it's gotten to a crazy stage in our campaign here. It's obviously very difficult, and this is by choice. Anytime I want, I could have peace. They're not coming. It's like they're heading south as well. So, like I said, I've seen this before in my campaign. It's like all my enemies are now firmly locked in an alliance. I don't have any kind of mods that would explain this kind of behavior, but you can see, look at this shit. 1, 2, there's at least 3 kingdoms down here. Battania, Northern Empire. It's like just a host of different enemy forces down here. So fortunately, we've gathered all of our local lords nearby here. We're going to have over 2,000 to confront this force down here, and then march back north to see if we can't help at Varcheg as well. We still don't have all our companions. We had a loss maybe 2 weeks ago, game time, and our whole army was captured. It was a pretty disastrous defeat, but we're still getting on our feet here, and we are starting to recover. And I want to have these satellite castles like this. If I can keep Ataconia Castle, what's this guy doing? There's like troops breaking off here. If I can keep castles for the enemy to sort of be occupied with, I'm okay with that, but not. There's more forces coming in. That's fucking Belandia too. This is just incredible, and they just fucking pile in. All right, well, we're gonna give these boys an attack here. Whoa, their army. I think they just disbanded. Disorganized. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's see how many this is.
Surprised to see you.
That's a fuckload. All right. Well, we like challenges here. We're going to take these guys on. I can't get away. I mean, I could try to get away, but at this stage, that's not really an option in our campaign. We'll reduce player damage here to 50%. I forgot, about a week ago, I started messing around with RBM again. There's been a lot of requests on the channel for RBM, so I'm actually going to load the RBM model onto my current, onto this current save game, and then we'll give it a shot from there. All right, so we have the RBM module status and the RBM AI loaded, but not the crazy things like the passive, the shield shoulders and bizarre things like that. This does dramatically improve infantry, which could affect this battle negatively, but I'm willing to give it a shot here. I'm gonna keep it 50% player damage just because we're outnumbered so badly. I've had some issues lately with the RTS mod, so we don't have that. So if my character's dropped, it's just gonna, unfortunately, it's gonna auto resolve. Or not auto resolve, but you know, the AI will take over. But we're gonna give this a shot with the RBM mod. So RBM battles tend to be very slow and methodical. The nice part about that is, of course, it leaves a lot of room for tactics, right? It leaves you plenty of opportunities to assess the battlefield, look for flank attacks, look for hammer and anvil opportunities, right, where you can run in heavy cav behind the enemy infantry and slam them against your own forces. And incidentally, that's like one of the best strategies with RBM. Cavalry are incredibly more powerful than regular vanilla. And fortunately, we've got 140 cav for this battle, so that's definitely going to help. Now look at this ridge line over here on the left. Going to be able to use that. We're going to be able to use that as like a combination peekaboo ridge, and then use other tactics as well. We'll be able to kite off of that. The enemy will have to come around that ridge to attack us. Remember, they attacked us, and so then we'll be able to wrap around that ridge with cav, slam them from behind, and of course pound them with projectiles. Now, archers are greatly weakened in RBM, right? So this is going to dramatically affect the normal strength of our army. It'll be pretty tragic if we lose, but such is life. It's not like this campaign of mine is all that important. We're having fun here. We would like the challenge of fighting all these different kingdoms at once, and so we're going to give this a shot here. Now they're a long ways away. Sometimes RBM does really strange things, like it'll attack you and then sit back at the very edge of the map. Hopefully that doesn't happen, because then I will probably go back to the save game and we will try this without RBM. But I know a lot of guys are clamoring for RBM. They want to know, how tactics can be applied to RBM. They want to know what I think of RBM, and they want to know, obviously, how to succeed with RBM. And I've had a handful of battles now that were large like this, where I think this should be a very interesting battle, and I think I should be able to show you some really interesting tactics that you can use with RBM. So I have 3 cav divisions for RBM here. I've got the 7th, which is a combination horse archers and heavy cav. My 3rd cav here, that's going to be often defensive cav. I have a captain that gives them less damage. They take less melee damage, right? So those guys they'll be used in exactly like they are now, in a screen and a shield wall. And now what I'm going to do here with my other cav is use them in a combination of defense and offense. Sometimes you'll see me set them up as a shield wall. Other times you'll see me wrapping them around behind the enemy to hammer and anvil. Hammer and anvil, of course, is where you have infantry in the front, and then you pound the enemy's infantry once they've engaged your infantry from behind with cavalry. That's one of the most basic Bannerlord strategies, tactics. That even newer players are going to want to learn this tactic here. So stretching out archers here. I've got these rock walls to play with too. Anytime you can use the terrain as part of your defense, do so. Right, we're going to use that. We've got this little channel here that the enemy's going to come through. I've got 2 strong infantry divisions, the 1st and 6th. And we're going to essentially try to use these different rock formations here. My strategy is not fully fleshed out yet, because I want to see what the enemy does. So we're going to counter this cav charge right away here, because I don't need these cav getting in and mauling our archers. Just like real life, the realistic battle mod, heavy cav destroy archers in Bannerlord. Well, so the key to that is keeping the enemy heavy cav off of your archers. Conversely, we're going to try to use heavy cav repeatedly to just trample the enemy's archers. If anybody saw one of the other large battles I did with RBM, over and over again we trucked the enemy's archers with cav. All right, so here The enemy's coming in on like 3 or 4 different ways. It's a little bit chaotic, but I have cav lines in defense. Look at these guys absorbing all these cav, right? The screen is mostly green. We're getting a lot of kills. A lot of that kills are actually archers. So our Fiend Champs are still doing some decent work at range, and you can see they're protected. The archer cores in the center there are virtually untouched. So these cav walls did a beautiful job on a defensive side of things. Now we're going to use them to hammer and anvil right behind the enemy infantry that's plugged up here. So we've got our skirmishers behind our other infantry, and those guys are throwing javelins. And we're basically protecting our flanks with heavy cav shield walls. I'm going to continue to move up this 4th corps. One thing that works very well with archers, as long as you can protect them, is enfilade fire. If you can flank with archers, it's devastatingly effective. And there's 2 reasons. I'm also dragging an infantry corps here. Basically, we're collapsing it on that main center infantry of the enemy. I've got a cav line and an infantry line. Now that they're close enough, they attack. And these archers are opposite of the enemy. So anybody that's not mauled by our infantry is going to get shot to pieces by our archers there. The enemy's swallowed up. That's almost a variation of a kill box where the enemy is surrounded. We're going to be conserving arrows and ammo a lot in this fight, right? This is going to be a very long fight. Pull up a chair, get comfy, right? Pause and go get a refreshing drink, especially if you're a fan of epic long battles, because this could be an hour plus. It means 6,000 fucking enemies here. And the other feature of RBM, if you want to call it a feature, another kind of design of the creators, the AI, is they reform a lot. Reform basically mid-battle. They will pull their troops out of the battle and retreat them to where reinforcements are coming in. Now, I personally think it's a bad. It's bad in the manner that they do it. If you're fighting in the enemy, like they were just there, you should almost never just straight pull your troops back in the face of the enemy infantry, cav, and archers. The only time you should do it is if you have a distance between you and the enemy. So like a bunch of archers, if they're a distance away from the enemy and your infantry line melts, then you can pull your archers back. The other time you can do it, and it's very difficult, but you can do it if you have a lot of heavy cav, and you can use those guys as a screen, right? Heavy cav can be lined up 2 or 3 deep, and if you put them in strategic locations, they will block the enemy from pursuing and killing and running over all your forces as they reform. Well, the AI in RBM does not do that, unfortunately. And so knowing that, right, we know our opponent here, know your enemy, just like one of our episodes, just like the line in Last Samurai, we are going to take advantages of the enemy's weaknesses and demolish them in that regard. Every time they reform, we're going to try to do major damage to their forces that are reforming. Basically make them pay for trying to reform mid-battle. Now look at how many fucking Battanian Fiend Champs they have. Our army has a lot of Battanian Fiend Champs, but it looks like they have almost as many, maybe more. It was almost all Battanian Fiend Champs in their archer division here. But notice how unprotected their guys are. Ours were highly protected. Their archers are just kind of out here on the flank. This is naked archers. This is dead archers, right? Not only am I mowing them down, but heavy horse hit these guys for like 15, 20 charge damage. I'm hitting them for 40, 50, and they get knocked down. Right, so it's an assault, and all of that, and now we're going to be able to ram the enemy infantry up the ass here. Right? The enemy infantry is slowly making their way in. They're being pounded by arrows. We're going to provide a little multi-wing attack here. Our cav is running behind them and charging them, right? So their shields are faced the wrong way. And now it's time to charge with our infantry corps, our 1st, 6th, and then the 8th, the elite division. And what I'll be doing now is just dragging these individual cav lines around and hammering anvil, like over and over again. It's almost like a bad porn movie where we're just over and over again, we're going to be pounding them from behind. And we come here again, right there. Actually, these guys are attacking our archers. So our archers here, we will kite. This is different, right? If your archers aren't completely enveloped by the enemy, it's definitely fine to retreat. So we just pull those guys back. Plus we had cav totally slamming the infantry in the ass. This infantry line is collapsing on the main infantry vanguard. And now we have cav again following us, because most of these guys that are trying to reform are not going to make it. You can see the death spam is heavily green in our favor. I'm going to keep pulling back the 6th and 8th. that has a lot of our elite companions, and in a long battle like this, I want those companions of mine, by high level 30, 40 level companions, up as long as possible, because those guys are doing major the enemy is getting absolutely skewered, right? Even though they're the same strength of units, right? They have Battalion Fiend Champs in large numbers, they have Legionnaire, and it doesn't mean a damn thing if their commander's, you know, an idiot. We'll do some, I think we'll do some side stories in this battle again. I've got quite a few fans, quite a few subscribers that are interested in history during these big, slow battles. You can see the enemy's trying to mount or counterattack here. I will try to interweave them both into this battle because, again, it might be an hour plus. The enemy's still, oops, there goes my horse. I got enough cav around me that I should be okay. Let's see how much of a beating I take in here. I need a horse. What is that Shakespeare play? A horse. My kingdom for a horse. No, I don't. Never mind, friends. That was a one-time offer. All right, this is actually a huge amount of elite troops. So it's our turn to regroup here, right? I want to... these infantry are already kind of engaged. So when your infantry is engaged like this, don't regroup. I was going to regroup, but if their enemy infantry is right on your infantry, fight it out, right? You don't want to regroup when the enemy's right on you. Now, I do want to regroup here just because they're near their reinforcement spawn and they're just pouring reinforcements on us. We're gonna have to peel back, but don't do it when you're in the heat of battle like this. They're all over us here. They're swarming us. We will fight until they regroup like this. Perfect. Their units are starting to regroup. We'll have our chance now to regroup. Going to run down a few more of their troops, but at this stage I got to be careful how far I pursue. Right, we are at the back of the map, and so we're going to have some of our units peel back. We're going to pull archers back, and we're going to get out of here. If we see their cav counter pursuing, right? Sometimes they will counter pursue. We will simply attack them with our 3 cav divisions. We're down to looks like about 35 guys, but that's more than enough to mount a good rear guard action. Right? Rear guard action is what the military term for something like this would be called. So I'm a huge fan of history and all levels of history. I'm a huge student even of the history of things like philosophy, whether you're talking Kant or Schopenhauer. I just love all kinds of history. My brain is totally insatiable to that kind of thing. But war history is for sure my greatest interest. And something I've been really focused on lately is the United States Civil War, which I recognize there's a lot of international folks that might be watching this, so I won't spend every episode talking about U.S. history. In fact, most of the time I actually talk about medieval history, and of course the United States has no medieval history. You can see here the enemy's sort of hot on our tail, and so we're going to countercharge these infantry, right? We got cav following behind us, and so very quickly those charging infantrymen, now they have to deal with heavy horse ramming right through their midst. So Civil War, I will talk a little bit about the United States Civil War and some of the things that I learned that are kind of funny. There's some things that I learned that shocked me because it's not really taught in textbooks, and then there's some things I learned that were really funny. And I'll try to share some anecdotes during this battle. You could see this battle's been going on for like 20 minutes and I'm barely injured. Right? Xylata just got an incredible amount of skill points. She must be killing people somehow. All right, so we're going to do another archer attack here with our cav line. Now at this stage, we don't have as many cav as we originally have, right? We've had a lot of losses. I'm kind of wading through here, but look how much death this caused. 30, 40, 38, 32, 36, 93. Every other guy is knocked down to the ground. They're no longer shooting their weapon. This is just tremendously devastating to the enemy's archers. Not to mention, it's not just there's a horse archers on our... That's a big tranche of horse archers up here. Well, we're going to try to trap these horse archers. That ridge up there is perfect. See, that guy ran over one of our guys. Fuck you, fucking running over our troops. Okay, so that archer line still hasn't regrouped. I'm kind of going to keep attacking them until they regroup, right? Because as long as they're shooting here, they're doing major damage to our troops. Now our troops are a pretty good range. We'll move these guys up this hill a little bit higher. But it's just tremendously beneficial. It's a big win every time you can just run through enemy archers and just knock them on the ground, charge damage to them. You're just causing major chaos. I think we just got a bunch of reinforcements. It seemed like the reinforcements... Yeah, we did. So the 3rd Corps now has 114 cav. We've got archers coming. And now we're getting close to back to where we originally started doing strategy. Now, a lot of my archers are out of ammo, right? So one of the things we can do is we can do a bum rush charge around the corner of that high ridge. I'm dealing with a lot of enemy horse archers here, which is sort of problematic because I don't have a lot of archers with ammo left. They may not be out. Look at this guy. Just, they like won't die. Die, motherfucker. They hit that guy like 3 or 4 times. He won't die. Damage certainly is very different with RBM. So they got 105 horse archers on our left flank. But this is just the kind of map to trap and destroy horse archers. Because that high ridge prevents them from sort of circling like they would if they had a big plateau, we're going to be able to entrap them at some point. We've got this 130 heavy horse that's coming into the picture here. And this upper ridge here is going to be optimal for this. So I've got these archers that are either low on ammo or out of ammo at this stage. We can put the 6 skirmishers in there. That's infantry in front of them. And then we have a mixed division. This first is infantry and archers. A lot of times that'll happen if you had like one of the companions had bow skill. They will mix your divisions and actually give you archers and infantry in the same division. I don't like that. I wish they kept them separate, but it is what it is. All right, so 114 heavy horse here in the 3rd. These guys have horse archers. Yeah, these horse archers here. We charge these asses. Get the fuck out of here. These guys have horse archer slaughter dreams coming their way. Once we get our chance, we can't do it now because they're sort of pulling back. But we are going to trap. It depends on how far the enemy is away, too. If the enemy is that far away, we may take our opportunity now. As soon as we have an opportunity, though, we're going to try to trap and destroy those horse archers. A lot of times you'll see me do this. I'll send cav to the far side of the screen. I know where they're going, right? I've got an idea what my units are doing, and I'm doing that so we can sandwich the troops, right? That way I can micromanage my troops in here while those cav run over there. And at some point or other, we're going to be using those cav I sent to the far side there, the 3rd Corps. We'll be using them to hammer and anvil here. Now, all these Battanian Finns, but most of these guys are out of arrows, right? So we need to now use these guys like they're good shock troops. They're good two-handed weapon guys. Our troops are sort of skirmishing with the enemy horse archers over there, but we seriously outnumber them, so I'm not concerned about that at all. So this first division of archers and infantry, I do want these guys close. They're still trudging up to the battlefield because I want these guys shooting arrows. I don't have many guys that have arrows, and this mixed division is going to be good enough. All right, so the enemy's coming around the bend there, precisely like we expected. Fucking rocks in my way. Now we're going to have our cav follow us, and once enough of the enemy commits up that ridge, look at their archers are coming too. These guys are going to get a fucking nasty surprise. Now they should see this coming, right? Their commander, maybe he's blind. You know, I feel bad for taking advantage of a blind commander, but it's war, right? There's no rules in war other than kill everything in sight. So the enemy's pouring over the ridge there. They've got naked archers out here that we're going to envelop first, and then we're going to backdoor all their troops that just charged up the ridge. Now, I just charged with the 1st, 6th, and both archer divisions. That's the 4th and 5th. We're going to cause a little damage to the archers down here. Damn, these guys are blocking every fucking shot. And then very quickly, those guys are around the corner there. I think we're going to just let those guys work on the infantry charging. These archers are a major problem. There's a huge amount of them. And I'm going to just mow these guys down as long as they have no support. Right? These guys, look, they're getting knocked to the ground. I'm going to just continue to drag them through these archers. Now, these guys are defending better than any of the archers, well, except that guy minus a head. Fucking asshole. These guys are defending better than a lot of the other archers have. So our cav is told to charge through here, right? That gives me nice cover while I find a horse. Take your shield. And it does look like our units pushed through. We didn't even get to the hammer and anvil. I was going to hammer and anvil their troops there. Now they have 160 fucking horse archers? They have a huge amount of horse archers. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a horse, so I can't tell my units to sort of precisely take down their forces that are regrouping. We're just going to have to do the best we can here with our units. I like this ridge here. I like the other side of this ridge. Not only that, but I can retreat over the other side of that ridge. We're going to continue to use this. I wish I had more archers. I need a horse. Give me a fucking horse. I said dismount. All right, here we go. Look at those horse archers over there. So those horse archers, this is our chance. Look at, they're kind of pursuing us on that side. We can form some shield walls and face those guys. We can have a couple units directly told to attack those guys. And now we're going to drag in our large cav corps here behind the enemy. These guys are running the wrong way. I told my archers to attack them, and they're running like the other side of the map. It's still going to work, though, even if I have to micromanage these guys. The enemy's regrouping, all except these 153 horse archers. Very bad strategy, right? They're allowing us to kill them in detail, and that's precisely what we're going to do. They're totally trapped at the top of this hill. Now, it takes forever to climb a hill like this with the game physics, but we're still going to be able to get up there. I just spread out our third cav into a big, long, wide line, and that's because I want the net that we're going to cast over these fish to be wide enough to catch most of them. Right? The horses are starting to go everywhere because they're getting shot off their mounts. And now our third cav comes in here and charges. There's so many horses I can't even fucking move. We've got an infantry division and an archer division both charging as well. They're probably going to be able to escape over the back of this ridge, but before that happens, we're going to kill like 50 or 100 of these fucking horse archers. It's a really clumsy battlefield here. Like, I have no ability to go up in certain spots. It kind of allowed some of them to sneak out there. But we certainly gave a lot of them a beating. Look at their enemy is still regrouping. They're like 400 units away. Meanwhile, their friends are just getting pulverized here. Now they're in way too deep. So we're going to try to cut down as many of these guys as we can on the retreat. Am I the only one who thinks the battle sounds are fucking fantastic with Bannerlord? For sure, sound is one of the best parts of the game. All the different varying sounds that they make when people die. I mean, I can't imitate them; it would sound terrible. But it's just, obviously, I've never been in a real battle, but it's exactly what I kind of assumed people would sound like when they just got cut down by an axe. Right? There's all kinds of great battle death sounds. This shit happens sometimes right in the middle of like me saying something and I just burst out laughing. I can't help it. We're regrouping again. We've got this beautiful ridge. This ridge here, it just feels like we could sit behind this all day. As the battlefield kind of moves around, battles like this that take a long time do tend to sort of move. They tend to oscillate from one area of the battlefield to another, but as long as we're here, we're going to take advantage of this. The sun is starting to set. We've got the time pass mod working again. It didn't work there for a few episodes. I get some mod conflicts, and I also get some difficulty with new beta versions, but it's working right now. If you don't know, basically it allows daylight to pass during the battle. So the enemy's got some heavy cav over here, but we have more, so we're going to directly attack these guys. Anytime you can isolate and destroy an enemy cav corps, you want to do so, right? Because almost like modern battlefield where air support superiority is so important, if you can have horse superiority in RBM, or just Bannerlord in general, if you can kill the enemy cav, always take that opportunity. Die! Okay, the enemy's sort of slowly trickling in. I've got time though here, 112 infantry. They keep having these mixed divisions. And look, they have archers over here. So they've got archers in 2 different places, infantry in 2 different places, and cav in 2 different places. Regular vanilla Bannerlord would never do that. And it didn't work for them there because we isolated and destroyed those 2 divisions. But it's still a good concept. It's a good part of the mod. All right, so their infantry wave is wading in here. And they're not going to like what happens. Die! Oh. Now we're being patient here. I don't need to charge yet. I want them to be engaged. I want them to be fully hammer and anvil, right? If you do it too soon, then they're not really attacking your infantry. We might be just a touch soon. We're going to charge with both infantry divisions and the archers. And our cav comes in from behind, prevents retreat, cuts off. These are still elite troops, too. Wow, the enemy has a lot of elite troops. The cav cuts off retreat, fucking hammers guys to the ground and spears them. All kinds of horrific shit happens to them. And the screen is green. They still have legionnaires. Wow. This might take, this battle might take forever. All right, so we're gonna do some more pursuing here, unless something changes. I've got a minute to talk some Civil War shit. The first part of it is that there's a lot of things that people don't really understand, simply because they're not really taught in history books. And don't worry, I'm not gonna start rampaging with the whole notion that the South was the victim and all that stuff. I will try to stay apolitical with the Civil War. It's very difficult. Sometimes people take offense no matter what you say. But the American Civil War is very complex. But people always ask, like, what was the reason for the Civil War? Well, the two different sides basically had different reasons. The South didn't like the direction that the country was heading, and the country was heading towards a non-slave abolitionist society. They were also definitely controlling more from the federal government. They were controlling the states, and the South didn't like that. But the other part of it is that the South clearly needed slavery. They were not transitioned like the North to an industrial economy. And if they lost slaves, especially if it was sudden and dramatic, then they would suffer great poverty. Right? They just had too much of their economy was wrapped up around slavery, the cotton trade especially, of course. But the economics were a big part of it. Politically, it was a big part of it. The states were expanding, right, effectively stealing Native American territory as the country expanded towards the west. And every time they expanded and a new area, a new territory applied for statehood, the Confederate and the North, so to speak, I'll divide them like that, they argued and battled over whether or not those new locations should be allowed to have slaves, right? And the North, of course, in most instances didn't want slavery to be legal there. This is, again, partly political, because they didn't want these extra senators and House of Representatives being controlled by effectively sort of northern ideological states, right? So you can't help but talk politics on that side of things, but there's no simple reason. You can't say, oh, it was because of slavery. It wasn't because of slavery. You could say the South seceded more for slavery at the beginning. In fact, like, they literally wrote up a new constitution that explicitly said, basically, slavery will be, a right enshrined. But the North didn't go to war because of slavery. There's a lot of, like, sort of revisionist history that made it sound like that the North were all these people that were totally against racism and were for abolition from the beginning, and this is completely false. The overwhelming majority, I mean, almost all Americans were racist. The true abolitionists, in fact, the people who wanted to get rid of slavery, most of them were racist, including some of the senators that were very much abolitionists against slavery. Racism was just normal back then. That's the ugly truth of it. In the 1850s, most of the world just felt that people who were non-white or non-conquering were inferior. That's why we just conquered the Native Americans and the Maori in New Zealand and in South Africa. It was just might makes right, ruled the day still. So the North, basically, the main reason is that there were lots and lots of financial interests in the North that made a lot of money from the resources that the South provided. Some of it was cotton, some of it was other textiles, some of it was other product. But a lot of it was money, quite frankly. People with money, they still power the world just like they do today, right? These guys have an unfair share sort of in the policies of their country. And it was the same back then, right? You had political interests, you had people who didn't want to see the South and all of their cotton and all of their the benefit to the North leave the country, right? The last thing they wanted to see was the South secede and then have all of a sudden tariffs and really, really expensive products because they were their own country, right? They didn't want that. And of course, there's a lot of other reasons that the North didn't want the country to be fractured. Don't forget, this is 30 or 40 years after the Revolutionary War. well, the War of 1812 anyways, in which we got our asses kicked by the British, right? The War of 1812 was a stupid attempt by the United States to muscle up on Great Britain, and we had no business. We had no strength and no ability to muscle up on Great Britain. They ended up burning the fucking, I think they burned the Capitol building. It was basically a disgrace. But the country basically wasn't the powerhouse that it is today, and so they wanted to sort of keep the country together for that strength, right? You know, just to make sure that half the country, a lot of the resources didn't mutiny and effectively become a rival power to the South, right? We wanted the United States. So it's very complicated, but they fought the war for different reasons. And you can tell my combat ability is suffering here as I go into a diatribe about how complicated the Civil War and the reasons for fighting it were. But that's one of the realities, though, is that the North wasn't this just magnanimous, pragmatic side, and the South were a bunch of ignorant hillbillies. They both had their reasons, and they were both practical for the situation they were in. But the notion that the North wanted to just free slaves from the get-go is completely false. In fact, that brings up another point. The whole Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln had absolutely nothing to do with the Northern slaves, and there were Northern slaves. It actually had absolutely nothing to do with Southern slaves too. Obviously, the Southerners didn't recognize the United States government, the North government at the time. So when Lincoln had this Emancipation Proclamation, none of the slaves in the South got freedom, right? They're like, laugh out loud. We're not gonna obey this thing by this fucking tyrannical Lincoln. And it didn't even free the slaves in the North, which might seem insane to you, but what it basically was is Lincoln knew, and I realize I'm rambling here, hopefully you understand that this is just the same process on this ridge. We're attacking, counterattacking, hammer and ambling, and then regrouping to pull back our lines here. I understand not everybody here is interested in a history lesson, but honestly, folks, the tactics in this battle, at this stage anyways, are highly redundant. And I apologize if you're hoping that I just talk for tactics for an hour and a half. So what I was saying is Lincoln actually knew. Lincoln was a lawyer. He was very smart. He was politically astute. He understood that he couldn't just say, you know what, all the South slaves are free. They were actually protected by the Constitution because they were basically considered property, and the United States government can't just seize the property of its citizens, right? So it was physically impossible, legally impossible for Lincoln just to say, you know what, we're gonna go ahead and free slaves. He understood that, and so what he did, it's basically they do this. Politicians do this shit all the time. They come up with a loophole, a way they can get around that. Lincoln said, well, look, we can seize their slaves, the Southerners' slaves, by using the International War Clause that has to do with property and war. The North, and of course realistically everybody should, they viewed the slaves as resources for the South during the war. In fact, there was something like 3 or 4 slaves for every Northern or every Southerner during the war. So what they did is they said, okay, these guys are helping them farm, they're helping them grab resources. They're clearly part of the South. Anywhere that we win a battle and there are slaves, we're going to seize them. They become ours, just like they seized the cannons, the wagons, and everything else. And that's what the Emancipation Proclamation did. All the slaves that were part of territory that the army seized, they were free, but none of the others were. That's basically just a myth. It was heading that way, but that's not actually what the Emancipation Proclamation was about. All right, so it's almost like we've got an intermission here. This is kind of odd. There's a beautiful sunset, right, in this game with that time pass mod. The sun is clearly starting to set into this sort of dusty background as the enemy regroups here for yet another time. So hopefully that sheds at least some light to people. And unfortunately, most Americans aren't taught this, right? The schools, the public schools throughout the country have done a woeful job explaining history. And history is critical because it helps us understand where we are today and how we got there, right? I've talked before about how the North did have good intentions with the war. as far as at the end. And so they came up with what was called the strategy of exhaustion. Instead of a war of attrition, where you destroy as many of their troops as you can until they can't fight, what Ulysses S. Grant and Lincoln and some of the other war cabinet people came up with is the idea, look, if we go and destroy the South's resources, their farms, their railroads, right, Sherman bending all the railroads, if we destroy their ability to wage war, then we don't have to kill all these good Americans, right? They didn't want to do that. They understood that there'd be deep ramifications after the war if they went and killed all the Southerners. Well, unfortunately, no matter what, when you have a civil war and you force somebody like the South, you force your ways on them, you force all of a sudden your laws, suddenly black people are voting left and right, suddenly black people are like the judge and the clerk and stuff like that. This is like unbearable to the South. Whether or not I think that's right or wrong, again, I'm not here for the politics of it, but I think almost anybody who just thinks about it for a little bit can understand why there would be deep-seated resentment from that, right? It's never going to go well. Now, England, of course, England has their own civil war, and they have some similar scars, right? There are still, I don't know for sure, I've never been to England, I'm not going to start espousing like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm pretty sure there are still people in England that are pro-royalist, that think the monarchy's an amazing thing and they should have more power than the parliament does, and et cetera, et cetera. There might even be people that are still pro, what is it, Charles and his whole family, right? Now that family's gone, of course, but that basically think the current king and queen of England are just usurpers. In what's called the Glorious Revolution, powerful forces in England who did not want James II and his son to turn England back to Catholicism organized an invasion by William of Orange. He was the leader of the Netherlands. He was also married to the king's daughter, Mary. Well, this invasion, encouraged by England itself, led to James II fleeing England and being deposed. Then the English Parliament essentially gave William and Mary co-reign. This is ironic in both that the English encouraged a rebellion, an invasion of their own country by another country, and also that the Parliament went from being kind of a lapdog to kings like Henry VIII to deciding who would be king and queen only a few hundred years later. I mean, the whole situation is hilarious. They basically said, no, we're not going to be steered back towards Catholicism. How about you get to leave the country in disgrace, and we're going to give the kingship to somebody else. It's really an LOL situation. So again, just forcing them back here. We've got this ridge. It's basically a rinse and repeat. I feel like I could probably use this until their whole force is full of peasants. We're losing forces each time, of course, but we're definitely causing major damage to the enemy each time they come in. This battle has been so long, it is now getting dark. With my time pass mod. Now you have the ability to change the time pass mod so that time eclipses faster or slower. We can run down a few more infantry here. I have it set to something like 10 times the actual normal passage of light. So an hour passes, in like 6 minutes. So Civil War battles. Civil War battles are actually fascinating because the United States, frankly, wasn't very sophisticated at the beginning of the Civil War. A lot of people in the North thought literally it was going to be like one battle and the Civil War was going to be over. The very first battle, literally thousands of people from like the nearby area, they all ran out to watch it like it was going to be a football match, and literally, pulled up chairs and a cooler full of fucking ice and whatever beer or beverage back then they would drink. And then, of course, the battle went totally wrong. The North started getting their asses kicked. And the next thing you know, all these people that were by the side of the battle, that were there just ostensibly watching the battle, the next thing you know, some of these people got sort of caught up in this retreat, and some of them were taken prisoner. Some of them were injured when they were trampled by pursuing cavalry. So you have this totally chaotic scene, and at that stage, of course, people realized it was going to be, a lot longer than just one battle. The North had overall less quality, less experienced commanders. The South, of course, eventually had Stonewall Jackson, who was an incredible commander. Obviously, they had General Lee, who was pretty easily the best field commander in the war, and they had others. But the North kind of had this mishmash of a lot of them were quasi-political generals, or they were inept in some other way. And there are a number of battles, especially in the early stages of the war, where frankly the North got their ass kicked, the Union Army got their ass kicked, where they did some really strange things. There was one particular battle, I wish I could remember the name. I should have wrote some of these down before I started rambling on and on about it. But there was one particular battle where neither commander actually understood that there was a battle going on for a couple of 3 hours. So their troops are fighting, their captains are issuing orders, advance, hold the line, shoot, etc. And the actual battlefield commanders are like back at their tent hearing shots, and they're like, what is that? I wonder what noise that is. Sir, we're under attack. What do you mean we're under attack? Well, we're in a battle, like both commanders, and this happened over and over again. There was, we sort of assume that there's really intelligent guys at the top that are leading these armies. You can see we're using this ridge, by the way. This is a variation of the Peekaboo Ridge. Our troops are just down from this line. I've got infantry planted right at the base, and all of their forces have to come over this ridge before they can get to us. Of course, their archers can't help at all. And on top of all that, now we're going to hammer and anvil their infantry. First, we're going to clobber their archers here. Right, we're getting multiple uses, like a chess match out of our pieces. You see them just eviscerating their archers, and now we're going to drag them right into the back of the enemy infantry that's over this ridge. This is a good example, and you want to definitely do this if you're not. Use your units in multiple ways, especially in a battle like this where you have time to set it up. All that cab that just devastated their archers, look at them just roar over the ridge here, running downhill, trapping their infantry, and causing even more death and carnage. So in other words, we'll stick to some of the funny anecdotes just because I don't want to do too much factual stuff without having the information in front of me. I'll probably look like an asshole if someone's like a Civil War historian that's listening to this, and you actually know like the name of the fort that I'm referencing. So we'll be sort of vague about that, but the stories are accurate. There was another fort that was being surrounded by Confederates. And there was a political general for the North that was defending the fort. This is a fort that maybe had 800 defenders. And the Confederates had far more than that. They had, 8,000, 9,000, and more reinforcements were coming up. Forts were not a good situation in the Civil War era. Basically, they would starve you out. It's not like in Bannerlord where, a defensive situation you could win. Usually, and in fact, almost, oh shit, telling my stories again here, and I'm going to get eviscerated. Usually in the Civil War, and in fact, I think every time that the Confederates were sieged, in other words, where they were surrounded by the North, they lost. Right? There was a few times where they weren't surrounded, and the North attacked, and they got destroyed. But every time that the North that they surrounded the South in the Civil War, it was destructive. It was, you would basically starve the guys out. It happened at Vicksburg. It happened a couple, 3 other times.
Archers! Loose for me! Footmen! Move! Raise your shield!
Alright, so the Confederates surround this fort, and this ridiculous situation occurs. This political general, in effect, asks for a parley, right? He sees this manifestly larger Southern force come up, and he wants a parley. He wants to talk to the Confederates. And he said, well, I'm not sure what I should do here. And they said, well, we can't advise you what to do, almost like this gentleman's meeting between this totally inept political general and these southern commanders. And they say, well, we don't know what your position is. We don't know how many troops you have here. We don't know what, how much resources you have. And this guy goes, well, this is how many troops I have, and this is our position, and this is how much food I have. Do you think I should surrender? And the Southern commanders are probably looking at each other out of the corner of their eye like, yeah, sure, you should surrender. And he did. So this is just this is one anecdote, but it gives you an idea of the vast ineptitude that was deployed by both sides during the Civil War. You had guys who really had no business being put in charge of defense of a fort. They're out there. It almost seems like they had no position being in charge of making a peanut butter sandwich. But these guys are in charge of large defense forces. And I mean, this was widespread during the Civil War, especially in the North, but also in the South. Like, I don't know how many Bannerlord guys, we would all love to be put in charge of a defense, maybe without the blood and gore and amputations, but they literally had like fucking total dipshits put in charge of this shit because they knew the right guy. He had the right connections. Maybe he was a very astute politician, but he had absolutely no business, being put in charge of the defense of a fort. I'm going to join my men here. I don't think I've fought hand-to-hand much in this battle by choice. Keep getting horses killed, so we're going to wade in here a little bit. So I want to hold this ridge, but the enemy's regrouping. I wish I had a bunch of cav. I would charge in myself here and pursue. Again, though, we can continue to use this ridge as long as it's here and as long as the enemy basically approaches from this side. It's a variation of the Peekaboo Ridge, a variation of a reverse slope defense. You can understand, right? Anybody who's never heard me talk about this before, basically that edge where all my troops are coming over from, they come from the other side of that ridge. Well, the enemy approaching from where I am, they can't see any of our troops. They can't shoot. They can't attack us in melee until they come over that ridge. And because of that, that means their archers are completely worthless here. So I don't have very many archers left. We don't have a lot of ammunition. But what we have is we have a lot of infantry. I mean, this is a huge block of infantry. I can't actually remember having such a huge block of infantry. 226 guys. And then I have a supplementary infantry division as well. All we're doing here basically is holding this ridge, keeping our heads down so they don't shoot at us and throw javelins at us as we approach. And then, of course, when they're close, or if they come over the ridge, we unleash hell. Right? This is strategy. It's very easy to employ. You must have the correct type of ridge, though. You can't have like a slow sloping ridge. You basically have to envision, if the enemy can't physically see you, then you're safe in your position on the ridge, and it's a good spot to pull off this kind of strategy. You can see our units down there in 2 different clumps. I do have archers, but I think they're mostly out of ammo. I see it says half ammo, but what I think is the reinforcements have ammo, and the guys that were originally part of that division are all out. So it's kind of a strange mix. I'll probably be putting them in a square at some point, especially if the enemy has a bunch of heavy cav coming. And for now, we're gonna keep them towards the rear.
Archers, fire!
You see, here comes the enemy infantry wave right over the top of the ridge. As soon as they appear, they got a bunch of cav coming in. As soon as they appear at the top of the ridge, we open fire. We actually have our infantry division in a skein. I don't use it very often. I don't actually like how separated. I want it to be a shield wall skein, which you can't do unless you have 2 units. But for here, we're just sort of trying some different tactics. In front of me, I have the 4th Infantry charging, so it's sort of like a W-shaped infantry form. And what I want with that is I can't counter their cav very well. So let's square our archers. A square will give those archers some protection from heavy cav charges, right, just through the density of units. And this W shape, the key is that it gives you sort of flanking, crimping action on the enemy. The enemy sort of comes into the W. See how the W is sort of wrapped around these guys? And because of that, we're attacking them on multiple sides. Now they've got this line of skirmishers that I also can't really counter that well because I just don't have any ranged units. None of our guys have javelins left. It's a war of attrition at this stage. I'm the only guy throwing javelins. Definitely going to pick up as many as I can here after this little skirmish. These guys are all dropping javelins. And again, look at where their infantry or their archers are behind us there. So all we're going to do is keep out of line of sight from their archers. You want to be cognizant of where those archers are. If you see them shooting arrows, that means that you've taken it too far over the ridge. And you want to drag your guys back just like I'm doing right now. We want to fight sort of in this little, it's almost like we have a little private room here to destroy their units and stay out of their archer fire. And, according to that, and because of that, as a result, it's almost all green death spam, right? The enemy's getting mauled, their archers there can't help, and their infantry is just devoured down here. Well, it's the ritual killing, right? As a subscriber said, we get one of our ritual killings, and it seems like every battle we kill one of our own guys. I'm surprised it took an hour for it to happen. So continuing to hold this line, the enemy seems absolutely fucking never-ending. All right, what else are we talking about? We can talk about how Lincoln was no saint. He was definitely not a saint. Now, he's on the penny. Lincoln had a lot of positive attributes. He was very intelligent. He was a very astute politician. He was actually a master politician. But he was no saint by any means. If you want to, you know, again, give the reason for the Northerners or for Southerners to be mad, okay, their enemy's retreating again. They have plenty of reasons. Before the war, before there was like full-fledged war, to hell with you. The sides were basically trying to cajole a handful of states that were not really sure which side they were going to support. I know that seems strange, but there ended up being like 4 or 5 states that did not basically declare for the North or for the South until later in the war, right? There was sort of a process. Some of the southern states seceded, and then other states were sort of in between. States like Tennessee, these states were kind of like, well, I'm not sure if I want to secede. And Lincoln was aware of this. And of course, if a state seceded, you lost all their railroads, you lost all their resources, etc. So you really didn't want states seceding right before a war. You can think of it like it's like a dodgeball game where you're trying to get all the best players on your team. You don't want the major states seceding, right? So Lincoln did some actually very underhanded things to make sure some states basically stayed in the Union, and probably one of the most glaring examples is Maryland. Baltimore itself was quite a racist stronghold, quite a almost Southern stronghold at the time, and that's where the major elections were being held. To decide basically, are we going to have this type of election that I'm talking about was more for more for things like the governor, people who are going to be in charge, who would ultimately be the ones deciding whether or not they were going to be fighting for the North or South. Well, Lincoln basically broke all kinds of constitutional laws and fucked with the voting prior to that critical election, right? The election that would decide effectively whether or not Maryland was going to be in the Union or a part of the Confederates. Lincoln felt it was too important, and he did basically some highly illegal thing. He actually had people arrested in some circumstances without either cause or habeas corpus, where I'm probably butchering my Latin, is a little rough. But basically, if you're arrested, you have to be told why, and you have to be given a trial. Well, Lincoln basically arrested him and said, no, we're not telling you why, and you don't get a trial either. He suspended basically habeas corpus, which is, this is a constitutional right of the people in our country. Lincoln basically just turned into a tyrant briefly to ensure that Maryland, stayed with the Union, right? This state that was on the fringe. Worse than that, he put armed soldiers, all over at the ballot on the day of the election, right? So this is like blatant intimidation, and who knows what else actually happened. But that's just one example of some of the stuff that happened. It's one of those situations where people tend to be quite noble and hold up their values until their very survival is threatened, and then most people act in a pretty lawless, uncivilized way. This is just humankind. It's sort of a common thing. But again, imagine if you're a Confederate and you're hearing this, that he's arresting people that are trying to vote states that might join your side in the war, and your antagonist, Lincoln, of course the South hated Lincoln, he's fucking guy stabbing the shit out of me. He's arresting people to ensure the vote went in his favor. Imagine if that happened today. Imagine if Biden or whoever, I'll avoid saying Biden or Trump. Imagine if whoever was the president started arresting a bunch of people in critical swing states. Then you would know unquestionably, and this was a lot of people too. It wasn't like he had arrested 2 people. Then you would know unquestionably that you were dealing with a tyrant, and hence, the John Wilkes Booth, his statement he made in Latin after he shot Lincoln was something to the effect of, tyrants. God, I'm really butchering the paraphrasing of it. Basically, though, he said, tyrants deserve to die, and that's why I did this. So slaves weren't free, like I said. It took years and a lot of political maneuvering for slaves to actually fully be free in the United States. Like you had the Emancipation Proclamation was a big step, of course, right? Because suddenly slaves were legitimately freed by this, right? They effectively became possession of the army, just like when the army would move in and take a fort, they would seize all the cannons. Well, it's shitty to think about, but black people were basically considered property. They were considered goods, and so they would seize the slaves and then eventually free them. But that didn't mean that they just ran off and into the sunset and called it good, right? They were a lot of times, of course, and very bravely, they enlisted, right? They decided they were going to fight, but it wasn't like all the slaves in the North and South were instantly freed because of Lincoln. All right, a little bit of flanking action on this infantry division. My health is getting to a concerning level at this stage. The enemy literally seems endless. If you're still with me at this stage, you must be a very hardy watcher indeed. You must just be either a fan of huge battles or a fan of highly distracted amateur historians recounting the Civil War. Because admittedly, it's not easy to sort of give a monologue on the Civil War while I flank the enemy and not get shot off my horse and think about 12 other things. Hopefully people aren't too hard in the comments. just trying to entertain those who like a little bit of history with their tea. Again, I have no cav here to really counter their archers. I can't really run these guys down, and so we're playing this sort of short-range dance. We've got a handful of javelins, and the 9th Cav Division, which is me, I can run through here and do some damage, but eventually this is going to have a price, right? I'm going to get shot off my mount, and like I said, the last 3 or 4 battles, I have not been able to get the RTS mod to work. Yeah, this is not good either. I'm now shot off in enemy territory, and my troops are going to trudge their way up to us. So I don't have the ability in this battle to take over for one of my companions, right? If I get dropped, unfortunately the AI is going to pick up. Now fortunately, I think we've had so many tactical advantages in this battle, so many different maulings. Even this one, right? Our guys are coming over the ridge and decimating their infantry. Now I'm having them charge my archers, frankly, to rescue my ass, because I can't get out of here unless my guys come and get me out of the fix on them. But I think the computer should be able to win this battle at this stage. Honestly, I have no idea though, and that's intentional. I've mentioned it several times on the channel. In battles like this, you're not going to see me reference the amount of troops that both sides has very often. I might actually just have to engage here and try to fight my way through these guys. My reinforcements are fucking a huge distance away. At least these guys aren't shooting when I come up and start hacking at them. Okay, I have a handful of cav here, but I need several, so I can tell these guys to get off their horse, give me their horse, and then start trucking this huge amount of archers here. There's a huge line of archers that all I can do is just sort of spar here and hope I don't get shot in the face. Almost got me. God, the enemy's fucking charging me from every direction with heavy cav. That's not what I needed. Get up here, your Jarl's in trouble. Alright, so we've got some cav here. I can't tell which of these guys, so I'm just going to take a horse here. And then we're going to immediately drive this horse into the enemy archers here. These archers that are trying to regroup, I have a sliver of health. Drive these guys right through these archers while they try to reform. They're actually not reforming. I'm very curious. This is the first archer wave that sort of fought it out to the death. And I don't think that's the AI learning. I just think maybe their reinforcements are so far away they realize they can't reform. Whatever the reason, these guys won't go away.
Cavalry! Attack! Force attack! Line formation! Yeah!
Down to an absolute sliver.
Archers, soldier, infantry, light, soldier, form a line! Horse, follow, after me! Infantry, arrows! Archer, infantry!
So from a battlefield perspective, the Civil War was very messy early on. The North basically had poorly qualified commanders. The South didn't have like a huge amount of good commanders, but they had more quality commanders. They obviously had exceptional commanders in Lee, Stonewall Jackson, a handful of other guys. But it really was kind of a charade of stupidity early on in the Civil War. There was a lot of highly inept commanders that did very questionable things. There was McClellan for the North, who was basically, he was a Southerner who was in charge of I think it was the army of, it was basically the major Union army for the first year or so of battle. And this guy, this George McClellan fellow, who was a highly accomplished general, he didn't want there to be major fighting. In fact, he very rarely took his forces up offensively. They would sit there and not do anything for ages on end, and just basically look at the enemy and not engage them. There was a lot of defensive posturing in the Civil War. By the time of the Civil War, the United States Civil War, they had started developing the muskets. I think they were spiraled or whatever technology, and this basically helped you shoot a lot more accurate. And so suddenly defense, between that and breastwork, right, building defensive fortifications, were really developing to the point where defense really started to dominate battle again. That's kind of oscillated over the course of history. When castles were a big thing, defense obviously was very powerful because if you had a very strong castle, archers and whatnot had a very difficult time penetrating it, right? Anybody who's defended a castle in Bannerlord knows how strong defenses can be in Bannerlord. But that kind of disappeared, right? In the 15th, 16th, 17th century, with the advent of cannon, very powerful cannon, you could no longer just hold a fort, against 5, 10, 15 times the amount of enemies that were attacking you. Those cannons would blast away your walls. Guys would fucking tunnel underneath your walls, and defenders had a very difficult time holding castles. Right, the fall of Constantinople in 1460, something like that. The Arab attackers basically used very powerful cannons and blasted the shit out of the forces in Constantinople. This citadel had held for fucking centuries. But it fell, and now that wasn't the individual battle that sort of brought about this new dominance of cannons, but it was definitely one of the battles where it was like, okay, we can no longer just sit behind strong walls and think it's going to hold here. Yeah, so again, classic hammer and anvil. I've got this long line of cav following me. We've got two different infantry lines charging, archers charging, and then heavy cav come from behind. It's always a beautiful thing, right, when you can pull this off in a battle. It is relatively easy to pull this off, but it doesn't get old, right? As the commander, you're always going to have a good time hammer and anviling the enemy. It just feels, like you've accomplished something good, and it takes timing and understanding of distances and stuff like that. It takes not getting the axe in the face. But hammer and anvil is one of the most basic tactic that feel good and that even fairly new Bannerlord players should be mastering pretty quickly. So I think I'm just gonna let this autoplay. There's probably like 2 hardy fellas that are still watching at this point. So I understand, at this stage, very few people are actually gonna watch the AI blunder about. For my campaign, this has importance. Of course, I could retreat. Actually, no, I can't. We were attacked. So if I retreat, it's just going to ask me if I want to surrender. So we got to fight this out. But looking at the power bar up top, right, this orange is significantly larger than their little tiny sliver. And given the ass whipping that we've put on the enemy here, I'm pretty sure this battle is over. I actually keep expecting it to say, you've won. Let's take a look here. I normally don't do this. 4,300 against 1,300. Okay. That means we have 1,400 left, and they have about
They have about 1,800. So victory should be assured here. I'm just going to fast forward this. I kind of follow along with it. I'm mostly watching the death spam here, just to see if there's some disastrous defeat coming for us here. Again, there's no real tactics. The enemy, the AI just sort of spazzes back and forth. At least they're forming like defensive lines. They actually have 4 divisions there. That's kind of neat. 5 divisions. They have a cav division, looks like. And again, this is RBM. RBM is definitely superior in some ways, but I think as this episode and others show, that was cool. You could see our heavy cav just eat up their archers. RBM also, because of its predictability, and some guys have talked about this in the comments, right? If RBM had even just a little bit more variance in how the enemy regrouped, right? If occasionally it wouldn't regroup and it would just fight out that entire wave to the death, or even better, if it would fake regrouping attempts, like it would regroup and then very quickly archers would plant themselves and just resolutely shoot you to death, it would provide a lot more interesting and difficult battles. As it was, right, with 1,300 losses, we killed 4,200, despite the fact that we're outnumbered in this battle. We've basically been butchering the enemy with the RBM AI here. It's been, I don't want to say no contest, but it's been highly predictable and highly beatable. And I've talked about that in some other episodes too. The advent of AI is going to have very many positive consequences for people, but some bad ones, right? And some of them are going to be really bad. We probably can't even envision today what some of the worst effects of AI are going to be. Just like we didn't think our phones were going to turn us all into fucking drooling 3-second attention span fucking monkeys who can't use a map to navigate anymore, right? There are going to be negative consequences to AI. But one of them is one that we're not really thinking about. Most people aren't thinking about it, and that's for games like this. We're going to get AI where they implement it, like Chat GPT or something like that, into Bannerlord, and our days of winning are over. Because just like chess, if you're not familiar with it, the best AIs, the best neural learning chess simulators absolutely wipe the floor with even the best players, like the Magnus Carlsen type players are absolutely smoked. The Kasparovs, these guys get totally annihilated by the best AI neural learning chess sims. So expect something like that to happen with RTS games in the future, right? With games like Bannerlord, and I think we're all going to be looking back upon the good old days, where we could mop up the enemy, and I imagine we'll be turning the difficulty down from hard to stupid, right? So God, this battle continues. 40, 50, 600, an hour and a half battle. I mean, that's staggering. Part of that is the RBM. They keep on regrouping, but obviously this was just a massively huge battle in my campaign. And with that, I'm going to wrap this episode up. So our campaign continues. This was a vital defense by all accounts, by all looks here. It is going to be a victorious defense here. In fact, there you go. The enemies are fleeing. Massive amount of renown. 1,700 troops we lost, 1,650. But we're going to have a fair amount of survivors here. And we'll be able to head north to Varcheg to try to defend that citadel. So we're continuing. It's getting to the most chaotic portion of the campaign. The battles seemingly keep getting bigger and bigger. Or like the previous series, they're just one after another, right? These battle marathons, and for me, it's more fun that way. It's the challenge is intense. I'm having to come up with more and more creative ways to win difficult battles, and hopefully for you, the viewer, it continues to be interesting. I appreciate you guys. If the 3 guys who are still watching at this stage, oh, how interesting. Okay, well I'm gonna take a break. We're gonna be back for yet another battle here, as Ataconia clearly is gonna be under siege still. So anyways, thanks again for watching, friends. Please subscribe, hit like, all that kind of good stuff, especially if you want to see more from the campaign. We're gonna have to attack the rest of these folks here at this castle, but I need a break first. So thanks again for watching, friends, and I'll see you guys next time.